Welcome to National Parks Traveler, where we explore the national parks and the issues that involve them.
Elephant seals are not your small, cuddly marine mammals. They're behemoths. Males, known as bulls, can reach 5,000 pounds, while females, known as cows, routinely clock in at around 1,000 pounds or so. This is Kurt Repenchek, your host at the National Parks Traveler. If you're a wildlife watcher, now is the time to check off elephant seals from your life list. Between December and March, they come in mass to Point Reyes National Seashore in California to give birth and mate again. But they don't come ashore simply to laze about and soak up the sun when it's shining. Males are building their harems, much like bull elk do, and that can sometimes lead to fights between these ponderous animals. To learn more about elephant seals, how they spend their days, and where you can see them at Point Reyes, we're joined today by Sarah Codde, a marine ecologist at the National Seashore. We'll be back in a minute with Sarah.
Acadia National Park is one of the 10 most popular national parks in the United States. It's also one of the smallest and most vulnerable. That's why Friends of Acadia exists. Friends of Acadia is an independent organization of passionate people inspiring those who love this magnificent park to make a real and lasting difference for Acadia. You can make a difference at friendsofacadia.org. The Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation is the primary nonprofit fundraising partner for the Blue Ridge Parkway. It is made up of people who have a deep love for this majestic road and want to ensure that its natural beauty and the experiences it offers endure for generations to come. Show your appreciation at brpfoundation.org.
Welcome to the Traveler, Sarah. Glad you could join us.
Thank you, Kurt. I'm very happy to be here.
So, it's mid-December. The elephant seals will be coming to Point Reyes in the near future if they haven't started showing up already. Before we get into exactly what they do there at Point Reyes, can you fill us in on some biological background on these marine animals?
Yeah, well, elephant seals are quite amazing species. They have a lot of cool history and fun facts about them. One of the things that surprises a lot of people is that elephant seals fast while they're on shore. So that means they're not eating or drinking. And a female during the breeding season will be on shore for about a month. So she's not eating that entire time, and she's nursing a pup. And then the males are on shore even longer. So they can be on shore for about 3 months. Again, they're not eating that entire time, and they're fighting with each other. So it's quite impressive that that's just kind of a normal life for them to go that long without eating and to be so active.
That really is amazing. I mean, you hear the word seal and you think of something small and almost cuddly if you believe in Disney shows. But, these are massive animals.
Yeah, so an adult male elephant seal we call a bull, and a bull can be, 5,000 pounds.
5,000.
Yeah, 5,000 pounds, about 15 feet long. So really quite impressive when you see them in real life.
And they're docile, right? You can just go down and pet them on the nose.
Oh, yeah. Exactly what we encourage.
That's what I thought.
So, they're wild animals. There is some misconceptions. A lot of people think that they're lazy because when you see them on land, they are sleeping a lot. But it is because they're so active in the water, and it's, the fighting that takes place. They need to rest in between that. So, but they are still wild animals, and they can be quite dangerous.
They're huge. You said the males, the bulls, can get up to 5,000 pounds. That's heavier than my car. What about the females, the cows? How big do they get?
Yeah, so the females are smaller. They're going to be about 1,000, maybe 1,200 pounds, and maybe only about 8 to 10 feet long. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, much smaller. How do they get so big? What do they eat? Where do they travel?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we know more about what the females are eating, and they actually mostly feed on a small fish called a lanternfish that's kind of out in the deep sea. They also feed on squid, but they're basically just constantly eating when they're out at shore or out in the water to really bulk up. The males, we know a little bit less about what they're eating, but we have some guesses and some assumptions, but they're going to have a more varied diet. They will also be eating squid, but a lot more different deep sea fishes, maybe some small sharks like dogfish. They need to really eat a lot more of the more kind of nutritious fish that's really going to bulk up their weight.
You look at them, you wouldn't think that they'd be able to take down a shark, even if it's just a dog shark.
Yeah, well, they're pretty tough animals, but yeah, it's just they're small sharks that they're going after, and they're quick in the
Yeah,
water.
the seals are quick in the water. These 5,000-pound creatures. They've got bulbous noses, or at least the bulls have these bulbous noses. What's that all about?
Yeah, so the males have what's called a proboscis. So that is that kind of like elephant-like trunk, which is why they have that name, elephant seals. And that's just a secondary sexual characteristic. So it evolved because of their mating strategy. So the males compete for the right to mate with females. So that big nose basically kind of helps deepen their vocalizations. They kind of use it as a resonating chamber when they make their vocalizations, which kind of help compete with the males before they go into an actual battle.
Interesting. Yeah, we're going to get into that in a minute. Do they travel in herds, so to speak?
No, not that we're aware of. There's some research where they satellite tag elephant seals and track them when they're out at sea. And from that data, it looks at that like they're pretty solitary out at sea, but on land, definitely they stick together in groupings.
Raises a question. You mentioned that the males could be on shore for 3 months, I think, or was it the females?
The males, yeah, males are
Yeah.
on shore for 3 months.
What do they do the rest of the year? Are they always out at sea?
So yes and no. Most of their lives is spent out at sea, but they come on shore twice a year. So once during the breeding season, and then a second time to molt. So they shed their fur and their top layer of skin. So they come on shore to do that for about a month. But then the rest of the year, they are just spent out at sea, constantly diving.
They have fur. The pictures I've seen, they look pretty sleek.
Yeah, the fur is very, very short. So in pictures, yeah, it's not going to really show up very well, but very, very short fur.
Yeah. Does the fur help with insulation, or is it mainly the blubber that they rely on to stay warm out at ocean?
Yeah, so they're relying on their really thick blubber to help keep warm in the cold water.
Are they migratory? I mean, when they're out at sea, where do they spend their time? Do we know much
Yes, so
about that?
they actually migrate pretty far. They're going to migrate about 3 to 4,000 miles away to their foraging areas out at sea. And it's actually quite impressive. They do that migration 2 times in a single year. They're actually one of the longest, or they have the longest migration in a year because they do it twice. So they travel about 14,000 miles in a single year.
Between where and where? I mean, is Point Reyes one of the endpoints or one of the midpoints?
One of the endpoints. So yeah, the land is kind of the endpoint, and there's a handful of colonies along California and in Mexico, but they're traveling. Their foraging areas are north of us, kind of northwest. The females go open ocean, just a few thousand miles northwest. The males, no matter where they are along the California coast, the males are traveling up towards the Aleutian Islands.
Wow, that's amazing. And they're solitary, so they just go and just go.
Yeah, and they generally are feeding in similar areas, but they're still solo. Females and males feed in slightly different areas because they are going after different prey. But there's kind of a general area that, females will go to and a general area where males will go to.
Now, it's interesting that they go after different prey. Is that because the males are so much bigger they can tackle larger prey, so to speak?
Um, Kind of. So it's a little bit of that they need that richer food, which is found more along the continental shelf. And that's also the riskier place for them. So that's where sh white sharks are going to be and orcas. So those are their two predators. So the males being bigger, they're going to take that risk and swim where their predators are going to be, but they're going to have that high reward of better prey. The females being smaller, they don't really want to take that risk and be around the predators. So they're going after the less nutritious food, but it's the safer route.
Interesting. Any idea how fast they swim? I had author John Waterman on the show the other week, and he's done some kayaking up in the Arctic area in the Beaufort Sea, and he says polar bears can swim faster than he can kayak. So, how fast can these 5,000-pound males or 1,000-pound females swim?
Yeah, that's a great question that I know there's an answer to, and I don't know it offhand.
Well, we do play Stump the Ranger from time to time. All right, we'll just move on. Now, I'm curious. I mean, 5,000 pounds for the male. Any history in terms of whaling ships going after them, or did Captain Cook and his crew see these as a source of dinner or breakfast and try and go after the elephant seals?
Yeah, that's actually one of the really amazing stories of their history is they almost went extinct because they were heavily hunted for their blubber. So the blubber was providing a lot of oil. So whalers kind of switched from whales to elephant seals. And they're really easy to hunt. So they're very predictable when they come on shore. Like I mentioned, that they come on shore twice a year, and they typically return to the same place every year. So they're very predictable in their movements, and they're not afraid of people. So they don't really care about us, and they don't run away from us. And so they're very easy to just go up to and unfortunately kill. So they almost went extinct in the late 1800s. And then one small colony was found on Guadalupe Island in Mexico. And there's some question about how many seals actually were left, but it could be as low as, less than 100 seals. And so once they were found, after, a few years, that island was then made into a reserve to protect the island and the elephant seals. And the Mexican government banned the hunting of elephant seals. And so from those really small protections, the elephant seal population just started growing and expanding, and then moved into U.S. Territory. So then the U.S. government also banned the hunting of elephant seals. And now the entire elephant seal population today stems from that small population, which has some issues in itself being from a little population. But the population now is doing great. And there's probably more elephant seals now than there ever were before.
Really?
Yeah, so it's an amazing, amazing conservation success story.
And no genetic headaches from such a small.
So that's the worry. So nothing yet has happened, but they definitely have low genetic diversity because of that. But over time, it gets better and better, but there's still a lot of worry that something could just wipe them out.
Yeah, yeah. Are they just a Pacific Ocean species?
Yes, yeah. So just along the U.S. and Mexico coast on the Pacific Ocean.
And is Point Reyes National Seashore the only unit of the park system that sees elephant seals come ashore?
No, there's elephant seals at Channel Islands National Park. They mostly haul out in the Channel Islands that is not under the National Park Service, but they're definitely will show up around there.
Interesting, interesting. I've read a little bit. I'm not a scholar yet on elephant seals, but I stumbled across some research on how they communicate, and the bulls apparently know each other's voices, so to speak, can recognize them and know who's a friend, who's a foe, and the cows develop the same type of audible relationship with their pups.
Yeah, correct. So yeah, the males, they basically can recognize if they've fought a male before based off of his vocalization. So kind of the first step when they're initiating a battle is to vocalize. to be like, hey, I sound tougher than you. And so sometimes they'll recognize and be like, hey, I remember I fought you last year and I lost. So I'm turning around and heading away. Or they'll be like, oh, I fought you and I won. So I'm going to try to fight you again. So yeah, they can recognize the voice or the vocalizations of males that they have fought before. And then the females are able to recognize their pup's call, I think within just a couple days. So as soon as the pups are born, she's vocalizing to the pup is vocalizing back at her, and she's really learning its sound. The pup takes a little bit longer. I think there's some new research showing that the pup takes a couple weeks at least to recognize its mom's voice. So it's really on the mom to be able to find her pup if they get separated.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine they probably stick pretty close for those first couple of weeks to the mom.
Yeah, so mostly they're going to stick together, but the males, being much bigger, will sometimes just kind of trample through a colony of females to maybe fight another male, or if another male is trying to sneak in to mate with the females, that bull might kind of just trample through the group to scare him off. And then that can cause some confusion in the group, and so moms and pups can get separated that way.
Do the bulls try and build harems like bull elk do?
Yes. So yeah, that's the mating strategy. So the females form these harems, and then there's an alpha male that basically protects them from other males and will mate with many of those females. But the other males do have their chances. We have some sneaker males that we call them. So those are males that will try to sneak into the harem when the alpha bull is maybe preoccupied. So he'll try to sneak in and mate. And then we also have the skulkers. So those are the males that kind of hang out in the water waiting for the females to leave, and they'll try to mate with the female in the water.
And how many females might be in a bull's harem?
It really varies. I mean, it can be small, being just a couple, and then the biggest one I've seen is probably, 75, maybe even 100 females. But that's not very common, at least in Point Reyes.
Okay, all right. This is Kurt Repenchuk with the National Parks Traveler. We're talking today with Sarah Codde, a wildlife biologist at Point Reyes National Seashore, about elephant seals. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Smokey's Life. Full of stunning photography and thought-provoking reads, Smokey's Life Journal is a biannual magazine produced by Smokey's Life, formerly the Great Smoky Mountains Association. Members receive it free of charge each spring and fall, and it is available for purchase in retail stores throughout Great Smoky Mountains National Park and online at smokieslife.org. Now for some great news. Now, through December 31st, we have an opportunity to amplify the impact of donations to the traveler. Newsmatch, powered through the Institute for Nonprofit News, is the largest grassroots fundraising campaign designed specifically to support nonprofit news organizations, having raised over $300 million since 2017. Through the Travelers Newsmatch campaign, INN will match any individual contributor donations up to $1,000. Or sign up for a small monthly donation, and Newsmatch will match that 12x. Either way you stack it, donating now will double the effectiveness of your efforts. Your support enables the Travelers Nonprofit Newsroom to not only help you explore the National Park System, but keep you informed on how the National Park Service is managing the system and how Congress is funding and directing the Park Service. This daily coverage would not be possible without the support of readers and listeners like you. If you've been thinking about supporting the Travelers coverage, now is the best time to do it. Your support will get the Travelers Newsmatch campaign off to a solid start and help keep its newsroom on strong footing. If you believe in the work the Traveler's doing, please give to double the impact of your donation.
So, Sarah, as I mentioned, it's mid-December, and the elephant seals are starting to head to Point Reyes. Have any of them showed up yet?
Yes, so I just did a survey a couple days ago, and we do have a handful of bulls. So those are those adult male elephant seals. We do not have any pregnant females yet, but I expect them any day now.
Does the mating occur on shore or out in the ocean?
So, on shore, mostly on shore, as far as we know, there might be, some females who don't give birth, don't always show up to the breeding colony. So there is some thought that maybe some elephant seals mate out at sea, but most of them are going to be mating on land. So the females kind of have a rough go at it. They have to, they come on shore, they give birth, they nurse that pup for about 30 days, and then they're going to mate right at the end of that 30-day nursing period.
Wow. What's the gestation time?
So that's a little bit of a tricky answer because they do have delayed implantation, which a lot of wildlife do. So at that end of that 30-day nursing period, when she mates with a male, the egg will get fertilized, but it doesn't implant in her uterus. So it'll just kind of float around in her uterus. Because as I mentioned earlier, she's been fasting that whole time and nursing a pup. So she has lost a lot of weight and she doesn't really have the energy to support a growing fetus. So once she mates, she leaves and she goes and travels that, 4,000 miles to her foraging area. She starts eating a lot, trying to put on that weight. She comes back to shore to
Oh,
molt, so shedding that fur and skin. And it's during the molt season that she'll actually implant that fetus if her body knows that she has enough energy to support it. So the active gestation is about 8 months or so.
you said some of the females show up at Point Reyes already pregnant. I mean, are they coming ashore to give birth or?
Yeah, so they come to shore in December and January to give birth, and then they mate at the end of that breeding season, and then go off. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Pretty crazy. And I mean, are they all single births or are they twins, triplets?
No, yeah, as far as we know, it's just single births.
Why do they come to Point Reyes?
Oh yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, this is a really special place, because it is a National Park Service unit. We don't have much development on our beaches, so it's a really safe place for the elephant seals. We have an expansive amount of beaches along Point Reyes. And so they like kind of low level beaches, ones that aren't too rocky, and we have a lot of that. And then with our added protections of closing the beaches during the breeding season, then they don't have any harassment from people. So it's a really safe place, and there's just a lot of open beaches for them to choose from.
Is it like a historic stopping point for them?
So we do know that elephant seals were seen in Point Reyes historically, but we don't know if they were breeding here. So there's a little bit of a lack of information of when were the elephant seals seen and what age classes were seen. But the thought is that they probably did not breed on the mainland historically, because of grizzly bears. So they would have been a pretty easy prey for grizzly bears. So we think mostly elephant seals were breeding on offshore islands historically, and maybe some remote areas on the mainland that grizzly bears wouldn't have been able to access. But there's a lot of unknowns, so we don't really know too much about their history.
Yeah. And any idea why the winter months? I mean, summer's pretty nice on the coast.
Yeah, well, they have that nice big thick blubber, so that would be pretty hot for them, on kind of the warmer months of the rest of the year. But yeah, so winter is a good time for them to have their pups, and then they can spend the, spring and summer months foraging when food is really plentiful.
Are there any long range studies of elephant seals at Point Reyes?
Yeah, so we do population monitoring, and our population, we started seeing elephant seals in Point Reyes, giving birth in the early 1980s, and that's when we started monitoring them. So this population has been monitored since its inception in 1980. And of course, it was my predecessor started that, Dr. Sarah Allen. And we've been monitoring them ever since, every year.
Got a rough number of how many elephant seals come to Point Reyes every year?
Yeah, so they don't all show up at the same time of the year. So during the breeding season, the younger animals, like the juveniles, like the 1 and 2 and 3-year-olds, aren't showing up here and they come at a different time. So our estimate for the total population is about 4,000 seals for Point Reyes. But during the breeding season, we probably have close to maybe 2,500 of those seals showing up at one time.
Yeah. And what's their age span?
So, it's another one of those little tricky questions. So most elephant seals don't actually live past the age of 4. So they do have a pretty rough life and high
Wow.
mortality. But those animals that do make it past 4 years old, the males tend to live to be about 10 to 12 years old. And then the females who can reach adult age, they live to about like 18 years old on average. The oldest female we know of was 22 years old, but most of them do not live that long.
And what's the cause of death? Great white sharks?
That's going to be part of it. We don't know too much of how much predation takes place on elephant seals. So there's a lot of sources of mortality. So definitely predation, but also just starvation. So one thing I didn't really get into yet is when elephant seals are born, those pups stay on land with the mom, and she does not teach them how to swim. She doesn't teach them how to eat, and they have to basically just figure out life on their own.
Wow.
So that's a pretty strict or a steep learning curve there. So a lot of them just don't figure it out, and so they just don't know how to eat or where to find good food or how to get enough of it. So we think a lot of it is starvation, but again, that's another one of those kind of unknowns is we don't know all of their sources of mortality, but we do know that it is high mortality those first few years.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess the great white sharks look at those big animals and all their blubber and whatnot as a rich source of nutrition.
Yeah, yeah.
Has climate change impacted the population? And I'm thinking in terms of the prey that they go after.
The researchers who do the satellite tagging have seen the females traveling farther west to find food. Is that climate change related? We're not really sure, but that is something that has been seen in recent years. And so that might be affecting their food source. The most obvious things we see right now is sea level rise, increasing storm surge during the winters. Winters, that's a lot of storms happening. And so we are seeing, loss of habitat, and their habitat just kind of shrinking during those storms when there's a lot of big wave action. The pups can't really swim for the first few weeks of life. So that makes it really tough during those winter storms. The moms have to try really hard to protect them from getting washed out. So that's, we're seeing that in Point Reyes. We've seen them shift where they're hauling out. So as areas become more inundated with that storm surge and just become a bit rougher for them, we're seeing them moving into areas that are more calmer water.
Now you're saying the females are going farther west. How far west?
Like past the international date line, there's a few that have gone really far.
Okay, can you tell me where the international date line is?
Oh.
From California coast? I mean, are we talking thousands of miles west?
Yeah, I mean I don't know the exact distance, but it's going to be thousands of miles. Their normal trek is about 4,000 miles, and so some of them are going even farther.
One way.
Yeah, one way.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. And so they're spending all their time at sea and sleeping and eating and whatnot. I mean, do they? I guess they must sleep somehow.
Yeah, so they sleep while they're diving. So most of their time is spent underwater. So they only actually surface to breathe for a couple minutes, and then they're going to spend a half hour, an hour underwater. And so they do these drift dives that allow them to kind of shut down part of their brain and sleep. But they're just little cat naps, like it's just a few minutes at a time.
Wow. Talk about elephant seal trivia. You've been studying elephant seals since the 1980s at Point Reyes. I imagine you identify certain individuals. I mean, like there might be a bull who's the big guy on the block for a number of years, or a female who's especially productive.
Um, it's hard because we do have so many, we could have 1,500 females in a single year. So it is hard to recognize some individuals. But if they have a noticeable scar, we had one female that we loved to track. She had a huge shark bite wound on the side of her body. It was a really massive, massive wound, and it was completely healed. So just this big indentation in the side of her body. And we saw her every year for, I want to say maybe 10 years. And she gave birth every year. So they can definitely survive those shark bites. So she was one we tracked because of that very obvious scar. But we tag them. So we apply a little plastic tag onto their rear flipper. And so by looking at those tags, then we can track individuals. And it's much easier than trying to just recognize them based off of scars.
How do you put a tag on a 5,000-pound bull?
Yeah, so we don't. So we're going to be tagging the pups once they've weaned. So that's when they've stopped nursing from their mom and the mom has left. And now the pups are just kind of hanging out by themselves and with other pups, and away from the adults. Then we can safely sneak up on them and basically just while they're sleeping, just come up behind them and tag them. It's kind of like getting your ears pierced. So it's just a really quick process, and it's taking place in kind of just that webbing in between the digits of their flippers. So
Hmm.
it's not really painful. It just kind of awakens them. If you were sleeping and someone tried to pierce your ear, you'd probably be alarmed. But usually they go right back to sleep afterwards. So yeah, we basically just sneak up on them while they're sleeping, and only the pups that we're going after.
Okay, all right. Now I understand avian flu has spread to marine life, and the elephant seal population has been hit in some places pretty hard.
Yeah, so the southern elephant seal, so that's a different species from northern elephant seals. So those are in the southern hemisphere. So yeah, there was a population in Argentina, I think, that basically a whole generation got wiped out from the avian influenza, which was quite scary for all of us. As I mentioned earlier, that the elephant seals have very low genetic diversity. So something like the avian flu, we're worried is that the avian flu could wipe them out, like it happened with the southern elephant seals. So we are definitely on alert, and there are organizations that are sampling elephant seals around California to test for avian flu so that we can hopefully be ahead of the game before anything too horrific happens.
Yeah, how do you test? I mean, again, 5,000-pound bull.
Yeah, so I don't know every way to test, but some of the ways is to do a nasal swab. So
Sure.
yeah, so again, you want to do that on a sleeping seal. And you kind of wait for them to open up their nostril while they're breathing and just kind of quickly put in a swab and then get out of there.
That I'd like to see. And if you did detect avian influenza, what could you do, if anything?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not really involved in the health side of it, so I don't know right now what we could do about it. I think there's some species they're considering, trying to do a vaccine for some of the more endangered species. But there's no talk of that with the elephant seals. So yeah, I don't know really what we could do. We do partner up with a local organization called the Marine Mammal Center, and they are basically a marine mammal hospital. So if any health issues occur out at Point Reyes, we team up with them, and their veterinary staff is amazing and will come out and help us figure stuff out.
Yeah, I think I might have visited there once. Is it up towards Muir Woods
Yeah, it's in
or Golden Gate?
Yeah, it's in Sausalito, in the Golden Gate National Recreation area.
That was pretty impressive. We took a quick tour through there, and interesting work for sure. Where in Point Reyes can folks watch elephant seals?
Yeah, we have a couple places. So we have a place called Elephant Seal Overlook, and that's out at the Chimney Rock Trailhead. And so that's a really short little trail, and it leads to an overlook where you're above the colony, looking down on them. We also have at our historic lifeboat station. That's an area where there's a small group of elephant seals, but they're pretty close to the viewing area. So you're kind of on ground level with them and you're maybe, 30 feet away from them. So that's a really great viewing. And then more recently, as I mentioned, the elephant seals are kind of shifting around in Point Reyes as their habitat kind of becomes worse with the storm surge. So they've been moving to an area called Drake's Beach. And that's really becoming the best place to see them because, again, they're really close to a parking lot. So it's a very accessible viewing area. You can just park your car and look out your window and see some elephant seals. And that's really become a really safe refuge for the elephant seals. It's a very deep beach that lets them get away from those high storm surge. And we do close the beach for the public because it's definitely not safe for people or the seals, but people can go on the sidewalk and view seals that are like 30 feet away from them. And they can see moms and pups and males fighting. So that is becoming really the best place for people to view elephant seals. And we have a great docent program during the winter season, and they're stationed at all those areas that I mentioned. And they're there to, educate the public about elephant seals, share all the fun stories and facts about them, and make sure that everyone's staying safe while viewing the seals.
How energetic are the male fights? I mean, are they prolonged or is it one and done?
Yeah, yeah, it's a little sad to tell people that it's hard to see a fight. They don't happen very often. There's kind of stages to the fighting. One of my favorite things to talk about is, when a male is kind of coming out of the water, he vocalizes to announce like, "Hey, I'm here, who wants to fight me?" And if the alpha male is already on the water or on the land, sometimes all he has to do is just open up an eye and look at the other male, and that other male might just, tail right out of there and go back into the water. So that's kind of the first step. The male opens up his eye, looks at him. If that's not enough to scare the male, then the alpha male will sit up, kind of do some posturing. And if that's not enough, then he'll actually start to move towards the other male. And usually by that time, the challenger will get scared and leave. But every now and then, it actually leads to a physical altercation where they're basically just kind of slamming their chest against each other. They're biting the backs of each other. And the longest fight I saw was probably like a good 15, 20 minutes, and it actually went into the water where they continued to fight. But most fights that are actually leading to like a physical altercation, it's, maybe a few minutes.
Hmm.
But it's quite impressive to see. It is a bit bloody, so people have to be prepared for that. But this is not a fight to the death. It's really rare for males to die in a fight. Usually just one of the males will give up and will go back into the water.
Yeah, yeah. And the females are kind of docile. They don't fight with each other or take
Oh
on the
no,
bull.
they fight with each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a lot of anger with those females. It's nothing like the males. It's a lot of growling at each other. Because they're in these harems and they're in these really tight groups, there's just a lot of like, "Hey, you're too close to my pup," or "What are you doing with my pup?" And so there's a lot of vocalizations that are angry towards each other.
Interesting, interesting. And how long are the seals there at Point Reyes?
So yeah, the females will be here for about 30 days, give or take, during the breeding season. And then the males Some males will be here for about 3 months during the breeding season. And then when they come back to molt, they'll be here for about a month. And then that's it.
And when do they come back to molt?
So the adult females and the juveniles, so those kind of teenager seals, they come back in the spring, and then the males come in the summer. And then I forgot to mention the juveniles, since they don't come to Point Reyes during the breeding season, they do come to Point Reyes in the fall. So almost any day of the year, you can see elephant seals in Point Reyes. You just might not see very many on certain times of the year.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like during the winter months, January might be the peak time to head out to the seashore to watch the seals.
Yeah, January and February. Those are the best times of the year to see the elephant seals. They're the most active during that time. You still have pups or moms that are giving birth, but you also have pups that have been weaned and are on their own, and those are pretty fun to see. They're just really big butterballs. So the mom, she really packs on the weight for those pups. And so they're born at about 70 pounds, and when they're weaned, they're about 300 pounds.
Wow.
So a lot of people like seeing the weaned pups because they're pretty cute.
That's pretty rich mom's milk.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, very rich milk.
Are there any elephant seal groupies? I mean, at Yellowstone National Park, you have what we call geyser gazers, people who will come out and for perhaps weeks at a time and just sit at a specific geyser and watch its behavior. Anything like that with the elephant seals?
Yeah, I mean, I would say nothing official like that. But with me being out there, almost every day at the different colonies, we definitely see people that are there a lot. A lot of photographers that like to show up every day. And then, our docents do a great job of really enticing the public too. So they'll see people coming back, over and over, but nothing too big like that.
Nothing too big. Any stupid visitor behavior, like let's try and feed them something or?
So so I mentioned Drake's Beach is kind of one of our newer areas for elephant seals. But before it became a real big colony, we would have males just kind of randomly showing up. And so we weren't closing the beach at that time. And so we definitely had people, pressing their luck and getting too close to the males, trying to take selfies with the males. We've had, it's a beach where dogs are not allowed because it's really dangerous with the marine mammals there. And we've had people, go with their dogs. And one particular story comes to mind of a little dog was just kind of yapping at a bull who was sleeping. And, they're not easily bothered by us and by other dogs, but this one finally got to him. So the big bull just kind of reared up to this woman and her dog, and they went running.
Any other fun facts and trivia that we haven't discussed already?
Yeah, one thing I haven't really talked about is how deep they dive. So they are one of the deepest diving marine mammals. So they can go a little over a mile deep into the ocean.
A
So
mile.
really a mile.
That's holding your breath. That's holding your breath for a long time.
Yeah, so about an hour, they'll be holding their breath. So it's quite impressive that their body can, withstand, not breathing for an hour and withstand the cold and the pressure at depth. So it's really quite amazing.
Yeah, I wonder if they do any decompression stops on the way up.
Yeah, not that we've seen with their dive tracks. They definitely do kind of a slow ascent, but I don't think I've heard of any kind of little decompression stops. But their body is well tuned to handle all of that.
A mile deep, that's incredible. Well, Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today. It's really fascinating stuff on elephant seals. I mean, we hear a lot of wildlife watching across the national park system, and I'm sure people on the East Coast don't know that much about elephant seal watching. But it sounds like a lot of fun and a great experience.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. There's only a few places in the world to see northern elephant seals, and Point Reyes is one of the top places to see them.
That's Sarah Codde. She's a marine ecologist with Point Reyes National Seashore in California. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
That's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. If you do head to Point Reyes to watch the seals, consider bringing a digital recorder to capture some of the barking and other vocalizations these big animals make. Next week, we're visiting with a ranger from St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, which touches both Wisconsin and Minnesota, to learn more about that interesting unit of the park system. For The Traveler, this is Kurt Repenchek. See you in the parks.
The composers and musicians at Orange Tree Productions have created a unique collection known as the National Park Series that has grown to include more than 30 CD titles. Composed against the backdrop of a park's sounds of nature, these musical scores will connect you with these beautiful places and take you there, at least in your mind. This collection is the #1 selling National Park audio series in the world and provides the background music for National Parks Travelers podcasts. Visit them at orangetreeproductions.com. Editing and production work for the National Parks Traveler podcast is done by Splitbeard Productions. You can learn more about us at splitbeardproductions.com. National Parks Traveler is a 501c3 nonprofit media organization that provides daily editorial coverage of national parks and protected areas. Traveler's coverage is made possible by reader and listener donations. Visit us at nationalparkstraveler.org.